G'day trendsetters, John with Gravel Cyclist. I'm coming to you today from the Peddler's Fork in beautiful, sunny Southern California. But we're making do. To my immediate left is Mr Neil Shirley. You might recognise this name. He's won Gravel Worlds and the Belgian Waffle ride, and he's got quite a history as a professional cyclist. But rather than me babble on, we're going to get some insight into what makes Neil tick. So Neil, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so like you said, I've been riding bikes my whole life since I was 14. Started on the mountain bike, then raced professionally on the road bike, and then when I transitioned out of racing, I found gravel riding immediately. That was about 2011. Started with Crusher and the Tusher, and I've been a fan and addicted to that segment since then. And now I work at Envy Composites on the marketing team. And so, fortunately for me, I get to be at so many of these events and get to call it work.
This is the roughest gig ever, people, okay? This is not a job. Well, it is, but I'm very envious. Envious. By the way, if you have not seen my channel, I've reviewed the G27 and G23 wheel set, which Neil knows all about. So next question, and you've kind of answered this already, what drew you to the gravel roads themselves?
You know, coming from a decade of racing professionally, I realized when I went to my first gravel event, it was the same vibe and same atmosphere that drew me to the sport of mountain biking when I was a teenager, and that community effect where like you can still go out, you ride hard, you put in the best, ride or race you can, but at the end of the day, it's like high fives all around. Everyone having, food and beer after, and it's so much more than just the ride itself. It's the experience is just so much more. And so that was really what I needed, I think, in that time, transitioning out of racing. And that's what racing really lacks. Like road racing, there is not that atmosphere at all. And I think that's what draws so many people to the sport now, because it's just, there's so much more. If you have a bad day, your legs aren't good, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there's still so much more going on.
Exactly, good point. Where do you ultimately see this genre headed?
Yeah, so I mean, it's getting so mainstream right now. It's blown up everywhere. More and more events, and we're seeing obviously for 2019 we're going to see a lot of true professional teams showing up at some of these events. I think that's good, and it also, there's downsides to it as well. But what I like to remember is that the people that make up this whole community, it's really not about the top 5% at the on the results list. It's everyone else that makes it, and to them, like, they don't care if EF Education shows up or not. It doesn't change their day at Crusher or Dirty Kansas or BWR. So, I think it's fun, if Taylor Finney shows up for an event, that's amazing, right? But at the end of the day, it's not going to impact like how much fulfillment I get out of it and joy. So I think as long as we don't like lose the reasons, why the attraction to gravel, it's going to be a positive thing.
Hey, good stuff. Are there any events that you, I guess, ring out as a favorite of yours?
Yeah, there's so many events that I've done every year, but now that I moved to Utah, and then with the addition of more and more events, I want to travel. So I'm going to go over to Iceland for the Rift, which is a new event at the end of July. There's the SBT gravel event in Steamboat that well. You've already ridden the course and given us all a preview. I saw that and I was like, I got to be in on that. So there's some really cool stuff, and just figuring out, like, everywhere you go, like, gravel's different. If you're riding on the pavement's the same no matter where you're at in the world. Gravel, it differs everywhere. So I think getting a taste of like the different regions and seeing some new places, and an inventor, race promoters' take on what they see as like their gravel event, and that's fun because they're not cookie cutter events, and so everyone is unique and fun in its own way.
And if I recall correctly, you wrote a little article about different grades of gravel. In fact, I'll have to link that because it was quite well written, I thought.
Yeah, thanks. It was like, you know, I get a lot of questions from like people wanting to get into, you know, the gravel scene, but not understanding like what is gravel, right? It's just this broad term, and like it's not defined, and that's okay. But I just broke it down on like specific what an example of some of these events were, and categorized the levels of gravel based on difficulty, and then made recommendations on like tire setup, tire widths, and what you might need. And so, yeah, it was a fun little article.
Good stuff. What would you rate yesterday's ride in terms of difficulty with the rain and mud and sludge? I mean, it was a lot of fun. There'll be a video coming.
Yeah, so, I mean, just riding it and regrouping, tons of fun. If you had to race in those conditions, much less fun.
Oh my God!
But yeah, yesterday was a special day. Just those kinds of conditions, which are so rare for Southern California, and unfortunately we have them, you know, all week. But you know, it kind of gets us out of our, you know, out of the rut, if you will, and have a little different experience.
So one of my favorite questions to ask: 1-by or 2-by for your drivetrain?
That's a good question, and it goes. I'm currently running a 2-by, a SRAM ETAP setup, but there's times where I really wish I had a 1-by, and it depends on, you know, like something like the Rock Cobbler event in Bakersfield. There's so many transitions. Like you come around a corner, and you have a 15% kicker all of a sudden, and if you're in the big ring or something, it's so hard to find the right gear. So situations like that, I'm like, man, if I had 1-by, it would be so amazing. But then I'd say most other situations and most other events, 2-by works really well. You have that full range, and just the middle gears are what's really nice to find that right cadence, especially if you're like me and ride your gravel bike on the road a lot and do group rides on it. When you're dictated, when you don't have, you know, when those jumps are so big in the gears, it gets really hard to find that right cadence in a group ride.
Yeah. And finally, suspension or not?
So I ride a Lauf True Grit bike with, you know, I would say most people are now familiar with the Lauf Grit fork. It has 30 millimeters of travel through carbon leaf springs. Really slick, really cool design. Definitely has its benefits and no drawbacks that I find, but also at the same time, we're at a point in technology where, you know, tires are getting wider, higher volume tires, pneumatic suspension. So, you know, like a lot of us yesterday were riding 650B wheels with 1.9 tires, and you know, you can run those in the, you know, low to mid 20s, and like that's a lot of suspension built in right there. So if we were still on, you know, limited with 35C tires, suspension is even more important, but we're getting up there with tire volume, and so the advancements are amazing right now, and really every year there's really cool new tech that's improving the experience of those that want to ride, you know, drop bar bikes off road.